Hello again. We're starting our notes on cell transport and homeostasis. Homeostasis is known as the steady state maintained between cells of an organism and the environment. All cells need to maintain homeostasis, and you are made up of trillions of them. The concept of this is your cells need to be able to get food and oxygen in and waste and carbon dioxide out, while allowing water to pass in and out of the cells. Just like you need energy and you need food and you need oxygen all the time, so do every single one of your cells. And just like you let wastes out, your cells also need to let wastes out. So this process of continually being able to do this helps you maintain homeostasis. And the movement of these substances into and out of the cell depends on your cell membrane and several processes that go with that cell membrane. So all of these processes we're going to talk about in this chapter deal with the cell membrane and what's happening. So stay tuned. Okay. Our main process that we're going to be talking about in this chapter is called diffusion. And diffusion is known as the random movement or spreading out of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. This is actually known as the law of diffusion. So it's a law, so it is fact, and it's never going to change, and has always been this way. So this is just basically saying how molecules are always going to move from high to low concentration naturally. For example, if you had a lake that was dammed up with a dam, and the high concentration of water would be in that lake, and the low concentration of water would be below the dam in the stream. And if we were to break that dam naturally without any effort, that water would flow from the area of high concentration in the lake to the area of low concentration in the stream very quickly. Okay. Diffusion is a type of passive transport, which means the molecules move with their own kinetic energy. As you've learned in the past, matter is always moving. Whether you're a solid, a liquid, or a gas, those particles are always moving. Even in a solid, they're moving back and forth, like with the vibration. So these molecules are going to move with their own kinetic energy, but there is no energy put forth by the cell. So just kinetic energy of the molecules. The molecules will continue to diffuse from high to low concentration until a state of equilibrium is reached. So in class, to demonstrate this, I would have put like a drop of food coloring in a beaker of water and watch it spread out. Other examples is when you are making like iced tea or lemonade, you put the powder into the container or pitcher, and then put the water in, first, and put the packets in. And you can actually watch that material spread out within that liquid. And that is just moving from high to low concentration. Okay, here are two GIFs in order to show you the spreading out from high to low. Again here, high to low, spreading out of that oval. Okay, so you're going to want to write this down. This question is asking, why does diffusion occur? Like, how do those molecules actually spread out? We know it's with their own kinetic energy, but because they have their own kinetic energy, they're constantly moving and colliding with each other. So as they're moving, they're spreading out. As they're colliding with each other, they're bouncing off of each other and spreading out even further. Okay. So simple diffusion, just showing you with a picture how it works. Here we have a beaker, let's say, of water. So all these specks in here are just showing you that it's full of water. And we're going to put a clump of sugar. So in the red is the clump of sugar. So a teaspoon of sugar is added to the beaker of water. We have now created a concentration gradient. So to have a concentration gradient, you need a space. And within that space, you need a high concentration of something, and you need a low concentration of something. So our high concentration of sugar is here in this red clump. And the low concentration of sugar would be in the water, in the beaker. Okay. So high, and there's low. Okay. So naturally, with the molecules, the sugar molecules' own kinetic energy, they're going to spread from high to low concentration throughout the beaker. Okay. This is called moving down the concentration gradient. And what is actually happening, these molecules are moving, and as they're placed in the water, they move faster, and they start colliding with each other, and they start spreading out throughout the beaker. When the sugar and the water are evenly distributed, all spread out evenly, you have reached equilibrium. Now, something important to know about equilibrium is that, yes, everything is equal, and diffusion has stopped. But even though diffusion has stopped, it does not mean that these molecules have stopped moving. These molecules will continue to move throughout the beaker as long as equilibrium is maintained. Okay. So here's a video. Hold on one second. So here's a video that just shows you what I just told you, but shows you in a video so it's a little more fluid. Here you go.
Molecules dissolved in a solution are in constant random motion due to their kinetic energy. One result of this motion is that dissolved molecules become evenly distributed throughout the solution. This tendency of molecules to spread out is an example of diffusion. But how do these molecules come to be evenly distributed? Let's start with a beaker of plain water. What will happen if we now add a lump of sugar to the water? A lump of sugar is composed of many individual sugar molecules, and even as a solid lump, the individual sugar molecules are in motion. When the lump is dropped into the water, it begins to dissolve. Individual sugar molecules move randomly and constantly from the area where they are common to the area where they are scarce. This type of motion, when molecules move from areas of their higher concentration to areas of their lower concentration, is called diffusion. Diffusion continues until all the sugar molecules become evenly dispersed throughout the beaker. The rate of diffusion is affected by temperature, size of molecules, and the steepness of the concentration gradient. Although not specifically shown in this animation, this is one of the processes whereby materials are exchanged between a cell and its environment.
Okay, so hopefully that helped you see it in a more fluid motion. All right, so there are three things that affect the rate of diffusion. You've got temperature, pressure, and concentration. Temperature, as this increases, it can cause an increase in the speed of molecules. As pressure increases, it causes an increase in how many collisions or how many times the molecules are bouncing off of each other. And when you increase concentration, it increases the amount of molecules you have, and therefore more collisions of those molecules. A decrease in any of these factors would actually slow diffusion down. So we tried this in class, so if you were not here in class to see this, we had a beaker that we put just as our control, just a couple drops of food coloring in. We had one on a hot plate so we could see temperature. Pressure, we stirred one. And concentration, we put in extra food coloring drops. You could actually do this at home if you have food coloring. It's food coloring that you could pick up at the store. And you can try this out for yourself to see how quickly diffusion could happen. Okay. So there are three types of diffusion that we're going to talk about. We got diffusion through a permeable membrane, and permeable means it lets everything through. Diffusion through a semi-permeable membrane, which means semi-permeable means it lets some things through but not everything. And then osmosis. And osmosis is one of your vocab words, and osmosis deals specifically with water. Okay. So here's our first one. We've got diffusion through a permeable membrane. And here we have a beaker of water, and we have a funnel. Okay, and in that funnel we have coffee grounds. At the end of the funnel here, we've put a permeable membrane. So these membranes are synthetic, meaning they're man-made. They're like plastic, and they're used to like mimic how these membranes would work. All right. So when we've put the coffee within the beaker, we have created a concentration gradient. All right. So we have a space. We have a high concentration of coffee, and we have a low concentration of coffee. Where is the high concentration of coffee? Here in the funnel. Where is the low concentration of coffee? Here in the beaker. So what's going to happen is the coffee wants to move from high to low concentration. So it's because this membrane is permeable to coffee, the coffee is going to move from high concentration in the funnel to low concentration within the beaker. Okay, and the water is actually also going to move from high to low, from in the beaker to in the funnel. So they're kind of like switching places. And this is going to continue to happen until when? Until equilibrium has been reached. Once equilibrium has been reached, diffusion will stop. But think about it. Are the particles moving? Are these moving or are they standing still? They are moving because particles are always moving. Even solid particles are always moving. So we have reached equilibrium. The particles are still moving. We will now stay in equilibrium and the molecules will move around. Through a semi-permeable membrane. So same setup, except now we have a semi-permeable membrane instead of a permeable membrane. So this membrane is impermeable to coffee, but it is permeable to water. So what's going to happen, we still have a concentration gradient. We have a high concentration, we have a low concentration, and we have a space. The coffee wants to move from high concentration in the funnel to low concentration within the beaker, but it cannot. The water wants to move from a high concentration in the beaker to a low concentration in the funnel, and it can. So think about it. We have water that wants to get in and can, and coffee that wants to get out but can't. So what do you think is going to happen? Okay. The water's going to rush in, but because the coffee can't rush out, it creates diffusion pressure. So the water's pushing up, the coffee's pushing down but can't get out. So we end up getting this pressure of the water pushing up. We call that diffusion pressure. The water will pass through rapidly at first in an attempt to redistribute itself evenly throughout the coffee. And as that happens, it actually pushes the level up within the beaker. So it actually starts to rise. So as diffusion pressure is pushing up, this coffee rises within the funnel, and it's going to rise. But good thing is it will not overflow because the force of gravity pushing down will eventually equal the diffusion pressure pushing up, and it kind of like freezes, stays in place within that funnel. Okay? So the movement of the water causes the level in the funnel to rise because of diffusion pressure. Then as the water mixes with the coffee, diffusion pressure decreases until it equals the downward force of gravity. Diffusion stops, but a state of equilibrium cannot be reached. Why? Look at our beaker. Okay, look at our whole situation here. Because there's no coffee within the beaker, you cannot reach equilibrium. And the reason that equilibrium could not be reached is because that membrane was not permeable to coffee. So the coffee, once again, could not redistribute itself within the beaker. So there is no equilibrium in this case, right? So we've talked about this process of diffusion, but we haven't really, we mentioned it, but we haven't talked too much about how it works in a cell. So once again, nutrients and oxygen are always flowing into the cell because nutrients and oxygen are always in high concentration in the environment and in a low concentration in the cell. And the reason for this is because within the cell, we're always using those nutrients and using that oxygen. So we always need to be bringing it in. Whereas on the opposite side, waste and carbon dioxide are always flowing out of the cell from high to low concentration because we are always making waste and carbon dioxide within our cells. And once it passes out to the environment, it floats away or gets broken down or something happens. So it's always in low concentration here. So once again, nutrients and oxygen are always flowing in, wastes and carbon dioxide are always flowing out, and water is able to move back and forth. Okay. So write this down. During diffusion, when the concentration of molecules on both sides of the membrane is the same, the molecules will what? They're actually going to continue to move across the membrane in both directions. I'm going to move on, but pause the video if you need to write this down in your notes. I'm going to show you a picture here next that's going to explain this concept. So here we have our phospholipid bilayer in our three pictures, and that represents obviously the cell membrane. Here we have our solute particles, salt, sugar, whatever it might be, in high concentration. Here is low. So here we see it diffusing from high to low concentration it shimmies through those phospholipids from one side to the other. Once we've reached equilibrium, you can see that there are arrows going both ways. So the molecules can move in and out of the cell membrane. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. That sums up this video. I'm running out of time here, so tune in for video number